So thanks a lot. Ooh. Thanks everyone. Let's see who was here last year and who's awake. There are two types of people in the world. Those that can make sense of incomplete information. Okay. So I'm here from Bonisa AI. I don't have a lot of time. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards. I'll just try and give you the golden narrative. At Bonisa AI, we try and help clients make faster, better decisions by combining data and software and skills. Because with any transformation, it's 70% human, 20% data, 10% technology. On the data side, we have a credit bureau reseller license. On the skills side, we have a team of 30 resourceful humans, data scientists, data engineers. And then on the software side, we partner with amazing companies like Siemens. So generally, in my credit scoring days, I would tell people, don't go on a spending spree. It's bad for your credit score. But obviously, if you're a big corporate, the rules are different. So Siemens has gone and bought an amazing suite of software for low-code, no-code software development, low-code, no-code data science, and, for example, graph databases. So we're trying to integrate all of that, and that's why I'm speaking about the integrated enterprise. I want to touch on all the waste that we do see, and some of the challenges in AI implementation. So we actually see that, there's a lot of challenges at the moment, but still a lot of excitement. So if you look at the past, in the Renaissance, there was a guy called Joseph Fouchier, and he managed to keep his head while everybody else were losing theirs just by being able to read the room, understand the situation, and know when to implement what tactic. So I think there's a lot of learnings about that today. So there's $2.5 trillion being invested in AI in 2026. But a lot of that is going to waste. So a lot of that is not going to the bottom line. So only 6% of organizations are successfully being able to see value at the bottom line level, to have agents not stuck in pilots and able to scale. So what do they do that the other 94% do not do? So just to make it relevant to credit, there's quite a lot of use cases for AI in credit, but I'll touch a bit on those case studies at the end of the presentation. So the gaps to production value is firstly, data without context. There are so many different data sources now coming online, so many systems speaking to each other. But if a human doesn't have context, they can't make sense of it. So it's the same with an AI agent. An AI agent is like somebody who really, really wants to give you an answer. And if they don't know the answer, they'll hallucinate. So giving it the context with something like Siemens's graph database with a knowledge graph will allow you to give it the context it needs. Another massive gap is intelligence without action, without execution. So there's so many insights being generated, but do they end up in a dashboard, in a spreadsheet, or do you actually execute them? The third one is agents without governance. So many speakers spoke about the governance, but it is a problem if humans need to implement the decisions made by AI, but you don't know how it was made. So it speaks about your orchestration, but it also speaks about your algorithm. So AI is so much wider than generative AI. So even in a credit score, then you would choose an algorithm that's a lot more simple, but still stable. But for example, if you're predicting fraud, then it might be more complex. So it's important to design for transparency, design for governance. Governance should be built in from the start. It can't be bolted on afterwards. So the context gap means that a big percentage of projects actually end up being abandoned. Then the execution gap means that individuals are seeing a lot of value from AI, but companies aren't really seeing the same value. And then the governance gap means that there are big costs linked to breaches. And there are a few big organizations where that's happening. I think in AWS, agents caused the entire environment to be shut down. Another company lost records, and then the replacements were hallucinated. I think even Anthropic, they had an entire repo leaked, and then typo squatters could make copies. So there is so much opportunity, but also, like Warren Buffett says, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Many people talk about the AI coding tools. They seem like the answer, but the problem is once you start trying to put things in production, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So you either have to pay for everything to put things in production, deal with the manual effort involved, or you can use a governed platform like Mendix. And I have another slide about that. But it's ironic that now with the compute problems that some of the agentic companies have, the agents are becoming more lazy and more sneaky, saying things are done when it's not. So now actually companies are starting to have to employ humans to check the code generated by the agents, which is a bit ironic. So yeah, the faster code just creates a bigger bottleneck. So I like this slide from the Mendix team that shows how generative AI and low-code no platforms are viewed in terms of risk and productivity. So at the bottom it's high code, then a bit better it's low code, then it's high code with generative AI, and the best, according to Gartner, is when it's a low-code platform, but with generative AI built in. So at Mendix, they use generative AI to expedite the workflow, so it's a visual workflow, but then also they use it to build smart apps. So there are always 6 permanent costs, none are optional. The question is just, how do you pay for it? Because you will have to pay for it. Do you do everything yourself? Or do you get it as part of a governed platform, like Mendix, for example, which is a Gartner Magic Quadrant leader? I'm happy to make the slides available. So think about those gaps. Think about how you need to design for them from the start. You need to begin with the end in mind. There's a whole architectural shift in terms of how the workforce will change, with agents having different roles in different parts of the process. So let me just touch on a few quick case studies. So we built a natural language analytics platform called Keras. So the big problem is often the trust deficit. So the trust deficit comes from not knowing what's happening to your data and not knowing whether it's hallucination. So we actually had to rebuild all the third-party orchestration providers to make sure all the data is safe in the environment. And we actually split out the calculation from the code generation, because LLMs are terrible at math. So if you ask it, what's 3 plus 4, it'll say 7 because it's seen it before, it's memorized it. But with big numbers, that breaks down. So just be cognizant of that. If you say how many R's are there in strawberry, it'll say 2. But now it's learned that there are 3. But now if you ask how many R's in cranberry, it'll say 2 again. So just know it's not smarter than humans. But I'll say more about that later. Quickly, just talking about different parts of AI and how that can lay the foundation for your generative AI model. At the credit scoring conference, many people were speaking about using generative AI to make predictions, but that's a terrible idea. Rather, use something like a supervised learning method to build a model and use generative AI to help explain it to a decision maker. By using bank statement data in the UK, we were able to outperform the bureau scores by 18%. And now with TrueID, we're actually launching a bank statement score in South Africa. In terms of fraud, their neural networks are really powerful, especially TCNs, temporal convolutional neural nets. In South Africa, we're also launching a fraud score with the South African Fraud Prevention Services that takes the historic inquiry information, bureau information, home affairs information, telco information to account. So now for every single application, you don't just get a flag, fraud, yes or no, you actually get a probability of fraud. We're really excited about that. And then in terms of segmentation, we're seeing a lot of value from recommendation engines that can create the personas that can help with upselling and cross-selling. So just very quickly, humans will always be needed to help train machines and make the output usable. Machines can help scale that human intelligence. But remember, if you have a hammer, everything will look like a nail. So make sure you understand the tools in your toolbox and how you're going to use it. And remember, AI will be smarter than humans who think that AI will be smarter than humans. Thank you.